I remember the exact moment I stopped believing my ex-husband was simply bad with money and started wondering if he was hiding it. It was a Thursday afternoon in October 2022, and I was sitting in a conference room on the 12th floor of a building on Peachtree Street in Atlanta. My divorce attorney had just slid a financial disclosure across the table. According to my husband, Jason, he had $11,842 in his checking account, $3,117 in savings, and less than $2,000 available in investments. After 15 years of marriage. After earning over $180,000 a year for nearly a decade. After claiming he couldn't afford the $42,000 down payment we discussed for a townhouse before our separation. I stared at the numbers. Then I looked at him. He didn't look nervous, he looked annoyed. Like this was all an inconvenience. "That's everything?" my attorney asked. Jason nodded. "As far as liquid assets, yes." I remember noticing something. Earlier, I'd asked Jason about a charge on our joint credit card. He'd spent 5 minutes explaining why he'd bought office supplies from Staples, gone into detail about whether the paper was better quality, whether he'd made the right choice. But when my attorney asked about his accounts, he answered in 3 words. That was the moment. Not proof, but knowing. My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm 42 years old now, and this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you start paying attention to the silence. The before. Jason and I met in 2007 at a technology consulting firm near Piedmont Park. I was a data analyst. He worked in sales. We married in June 2008 at a small venue in Decatur and bought a 3-bedroom house on Sycamore Drive in Marietta 2 years later. For a long time, our life looked normal. Not perfect. Normal. We had one daughter, Emma. She was 9 when he told me he wanted a divorce. We took vacations to Hilton Head. We argued about home repairs. We worried about college savings. The usual things that couples worry about. The problems started around 2019. Not dramatic problems. Small inconsistencies. Jason became protective of his phone, not in a way that screamed infidelity, just present, always in his hand. Screen angled away from me when he was scrolling. Business dinners increased. Weekend conferences appeared on his calendar. Client retreats that I'd never heard of before. Expenses stopped making sense. I would ask about a charge. He'd have an explanation, always, every single time. He told me about a $800 dinner where he supposedly met with a potential client. The client's name was vague. The restaurant, he couldn't quite remember, but the explanation sounded reasonable. Individual moments I could explain away. Collectively, they felt manufactured. In February 2022, he told me he wanted a divorce. No affair, or so I thought. No major argument. Just a statement over dinner. I don't think we're happy anymore. I remember standing in our kitchen looking at the coffee maker while he said it. A stainless steel Cuisinart we'd owned for 6 years. The clock on it was wrong, had been wrong for months. For some reason, that's what I remember. Not his face. The clock. 6:47. The wrong time. I moved into a rental townhouse on Roswell Road 3 months later. The divorce process began. And that's when I started noticing everything. Retirement account balances seemed lower than expected. I asked Jason about them. He said there had been some adjustments due to market volatility. Reasonable, explainable. Bonuses weren't documented in Discovery. Where were the bonuses? Split between accounts, he said. Which accounts? Various places, nothing significant. I found a reference to an old mutual fund he'd told me was closed 5 years ago, but the statements showed activity last year. Every question had an answer. Every answer raised another question. And the thing about being married to someone for 15 years is you know when they're performing. Still, suspicion isn't evidence. I understood that. So I focused on what I could verify. Then, in January 2023, something happened that changed everything. I was lying in bed one evening scrolling through my phone. I did something I'd never done before. I searched Jason's name on Instagram. He rarely posted, maybe twice a year, but I wanted to see if he was dating someone. I was curious. Not angry, just curious. He had recent photos. They showed him tagged in pictures with a woman named Lauren. She was smiling. They looked happy. That was fine. I wasn't surprised he was dating. Then I clicked on Lauren's profile. She posted constantly. Outfit photos, selfies at restaurants, pictures from girls' nights out. And then, buried in her October photos, there was a picture of a renovated kitchen with marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. The caption read, "Finally moved into my dream home in Sandy Springs. House with garden, so grateful for Jason's help with the renovations." She tagged the address. I stared at the phone for probably 5 minutes. The address in Sandy Springs. October 2022. 2 weeks after Jason's financial disclosure. I took a screenshot and texted it to my friend Sarah. Sarah is a family law attorney, not my attorney, just my friend, someone I could be honest with. I sent the image with one message, "Is this normal?" Her response came immediately. "What date was that posted?" October 15th. Why? Rebecca, when did Jason submit his financial disclosure? I knew the answer. October 13th, 2 days before Lauren posted about moving into a house in Sandy Springs. Sarah didn't say anything else. Just, "We need to talk." I looked up the house address through Fulton County property records. The owner wasn't Lauren. It was Jason either. It was an LLC. Peachtree Residential Holdings, LLC. Created in September 2022. 1 month before his financial disclosures. I printed the documents and stared at them for nearly an hour. The LLC had no obvious connection to Jason, no press releases, no business purpose listed, just incorporation papers and an address in Atlanta. But the timing was too specific. I started a folder. And once I started that folder, I couldn't stop. Over the next 6 weeks, I collected everything. Property filings, corporate registrations, bank records from Discovery, tax returns, insurance documents, emails. I built spreadsheets, cross-referenced dates, mapped timelines. Every night after Emma went to bed, I sat at my dining room table. I wasn't trying to catch him anymore. I was trying to understand. What had changed? When had it changed? How much was there? Then my attorney said something that changed everything. "If you genuinely believe assets are being concealed," she told me, "we should hire a forensic accountant. But Rebecca, I want to be honest. This is expensive, and it means we tell Jason's team we're looking. You understand what that means?" It meant he'd know. It meant his attorneys would prepare. It meant I'd be spending thousands of dollars to prove something that might be nothing. The estimate was $8,500. A lot of money, especially during a divorce. I hesitated. For 3 days. For a week. For 2 weeks. Not because I doubted my instincts. Because I knew what would happen if I was wrong. I'd spend thousands of dollars and look paranoid. I remember sitting in my car outside a Target parking lot on Johnson Ferry Road, hands on the steering wheel, thinking about it. I could walk away. Accept the settlement. Move on. Most people probably would. Then I thought about that October meeting, Jason's expression, the annoyance, the certainty, the confidence. And I realized something. If he was lying, then every financial decision in the divorce was based on fraud. Not misunderstanding. Fraud. I hired the accountant. His name was David Chen, former IRS investigator. Quiet. Methodical. The kind of person who speaks only after checking something twice. When we first met, I brought him everything I had, all my spreadsheets, all my suspicions, all my documentation. He looked through it all for about an hour. Then he said, "You've found some good leads, but also a lot of noise. We're going to have to start over with the discovery process. What you have is suggestive. What we need is comprehensive. That means I need full statements from every account he's disclosed, and any accounts he hasn't disclosed, which means we need to subpoena his employers, his banks, anyone who might have access to his financial information." "How long?" I asked. 4 to 6 months, maybe longer if there's pushback. There was pushback. Jason's attorneys filed motions challenging the scope of discovery. Why did we need 5 years of statements from every employer? Wasn't this harassment? The judge sided with us, but slowly. Documents arrived in pieces. And some didn't arrive at all. 1/4 of bank statements went missing from 2020. David subpoenaed directly from the bank. It took another 6 weeks. An account at a smaller regional bank wasn't initially disclosed. David found it buried in tax returns. Another subpoena, another delay. It wasn't dramatic. It was just tedious. David would call every 2 or 3 weeks. And half the time it was to tell me he'd hit a dead end. "I found a transfer for $67,000 in 2015, he said once. "Looks like it went to a business account." My heart sank. His business account. "Yes, but Rebecca, this account is documented on his 2015 tax return. It's not hidden, it's just old." So that wasn't it. Then, I found another suspicious transfer, $45,000 to a bank account I didn't recognize. Finally, I thought. "I traced it," David continued. "It's a loan Jason gave to his brother, medical emergency in 2020. The brother confirmed it. There's documentation." Another dead end. I was starting to question whether I'd hired the accountant at all. Every lead went nowhere. And I was spending thousands of dollars proving things that didn't matter. I sent David an email. "Are we actually going to find anything, or am I just throwing money away?" His response was patient. "Trust the process. We're in the discovery phase. We have to rule things out before we identify what matters." But I wasn't patient. I was anxious. I was spending money I didn't have on something that might not exist. Then in March, everything shifted. David called on a Thursday afternoon. "I found an account that's not in his disclosures." "What kind of account?" "Savings account, $97,300 in his name only, no stated purpose, no documentation." Finally. But that account led to another. And that one led to another. Over the next 6 weeks, David identified 4 accounts total. And he showed me how the money moved between them. Deliberately. Designed to look like different, unrelated amounts instead of one large total. The preliminary calculation was $380,000 to $420,000. Not final. David was being careful. But enough. After 6 months of investigation, I was tired. Not angry. Just tired. Tired of digging. Tired of spending money. Tired of the uncertainty. Then David sent the final report. 32 pages. Charts. Timelines. Account numbers. Wire transfer records. And at the bottom, a single number. $412,784. Hidden assets. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. The money wasn't sitting in one account. It was scattered. 7 separate accounts. 2 brokerage accounts. 3 savings accounts. 1 money market account. 1 business account connected indirectly to the LLC. The forensic reconstruction showed money moving in circles. Transfers. Intermediary accounts. Temporary deposits. Everything designed to look smaller than it was. But there was more. The Sandy Springs house. The one where Lauren lived. The down payment had originated from funds connected to those hidden accounts. approximately $128,000. 3 months after Jason claimed he couldn't afford one. I remember setting my phone down, walking into a stairwell, and sitting on a concrete step. Not because I was devastated, because I was relieved. For nearly a year, I'd been questioning myself, wondering whether I was imagining things, wondering whether divorce had made me suspicious. Now there were numbers, documentation, evidence. Truth has a strange feeling when it finally arrives. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet, like a puzzle piece fitting into place. The first court date was just about scope, whether the forensic accounting would be allowed, or whether Jason's attorney could limit what David could testify to. Jason's attorney argued it was harassment, overly broad, a fishing expedition. My attorney responded with the statute. She was good, but the judge still took it under advisement, which meant another date scheduled. I left court not knowing anything. 2 weeks later, David testified. The courtroom was maybe 3/4 full. Jason was there, his attorney, a court reporter. The judge looked like she had somewhere else to be. David started walking through the accounts. In March 2022, we see a transfer of $47,300 from Mr. Lawson's employer account to an account opened in September 2021. Jason's attorney stood up. Calls for speculation as to the purpose of the transfer. It's his own testimony, my attorney said. The purpose is whatever he says it is. The judge nodded, overruled. David continued. Same thing happened with the next account. And the next. Every few minutes an objection, every time overruled. The court reporter's machine had issues in the middle of it. We had a 20-minute delay while they fixed it. I sat in the courtroom with David and my attorney, not talking, just waiting. When testimony resumed, Jason's attorney tried a different approach. Could these accounts be part of legitimate business ventures? David said, no, here's why, and showed more documents. By the end of 2 hours, David had explained 7 accounts, shown multiple documents for each, answered the same questions in different ways. It wasn't dramatic. It was tedious. The judge thanked David. Scheduled closing arguments for 2 weeks out. When I left court, I wasn't relieved. I was exhausted. And I still didn't know if the judge believed any of it. 2 weeks later, closing arguments happened. Jason's attorney argued the accounts were consistent with normal business practices. My attorney read portions of David's testimony back. The judge took everything under advisement. She said she'd issue a ruling in writing in a few weeks. I left court not knowing what would happen, just waiting. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not dramatic, just a letter. 21 pages. I read every word. The court found that Jason had intentionally concealed marital assets. The hidden funds were included in the marital estate calculation. Financial sanctions were imposed. Additional attorney fees were awarded. The division of assets was recalculated. In practical terms, the outcome changed everything. The settlement increased by approximately $268,000. Attorney fees, totaling nearly $73,000, were shifted to Jason. What mattered most wasn't the money, though the money mattered. What mattered was that the system worked. Slowly, expensively, imperfectly, but it worked. Evidence mattered. Documentation mattered. Facts mattered. The text message came 3 weeks after the ruling. I'm not paying for Emma's swim team. It's too expensive. The settlement specified that we'd split activity costs. I knew this. It's in the settlement, I texted back. The settlement is based on fraud. David made numbers up. That's when I realized something. Jason didn't think he'd done anything wrong. A few days later, we spoke on the phone about Emma's school calendar. And he brought it up unprompted. "Rebecca, I don't appreciate what you did." "What did I do?" "You went after me like I'm a criminal, hired a forensic accountant, dragged this through court." I was quiet for a moment. "Jason, you swore under oath that you had $11,842 in checking. You had $412,000 in hidden accounts." "I didn't hide anything. Some of those accounts I just didn't have organized. I forgot about them." "You can't forget about $412,000. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're making me into the villain here." And I understood then what had happened. He didn't think he'd lied. He thought I'd been vindictive. Getting a lawyer was vindictive. Hearing an accountant was vindictive. Going to court was vindictive. In his version of events, the correct action was to accept his numbers, divide assets based on his disclosures, and move on. Anything else was punishment. "I have to go," I said. And I hung up. Because I realized something important. I couldn't fight someone who didn't believe he'd done anything wrong. 2 years after the ruling, Jason and I are what you'd call civil. We don't scream at each other. We don't have dramatic confrontations. We just manage. But it's not peaceful. Last month, he claimed that Emma's orthodontist expenses weren't covered under the settlement. They were. I sent him a copy of the page. He responded, "That's not fair. The settlement is already decided." Fair isn't relevant anymore. He's been late with child support 3 times in the past year. Not dramatic. Just 2 or 3 weeks late. Always with an excuse. A client payment was delayed. Cash flow was tight. It's coming. And Emma comes home saying, "Dad says Mom made him owe you money that wasn't real." That's the part that still stings. Because I can't control what he tells my daughter. I can't make her understand that he hid money, and I didn't invent that. I've learned to keep records. Dates when he's late. Copies of every settlement page. Documentation of every conversation. Not because I want to go back to court. Because I never know when I might need it. And I've realized something important. This never actually ends. He's Emma's father. I'll be managing this situation for at least another 10 years until she's an adult. And probably beyond that. The victory wasn't defeating Jason in court. It wasn't getting the larger settlement. The victory was learning to document. To not ignore what my instincts were telling me. To protect myself and my daughter. I'm not happy about the ongoing complications. But I'm not a victim either. And that's the peace I've made. I bought a small home in Woodstock in spring 2024. 3 bedrooms. A screened porch. A maple tree in the backyard. The mortgage payment fits comfortably within my budget. Which matters. Because one thing I learned from all of this is that security isn't about having the most money. It's about knowing where you stand. For most of my marriage, I believed trust meant avoiding verification. That checking felt disloyal. That questions implied suspicion. I don't believe that anymore. Trust and verification can coexist. Good records aren't signs of distrust. Transparency isn't offensive. And when someone becomes angry about reasonable questions, that reaction tells you something. Looking back, I can identify dozens of moments when I sensed something was wrong. A shortened answer. An unexplained transfer. A story that arrived too quickly. I noticed them. I just didn't trust myself. Now I do. Not blindly. Not emotionally. Just carefully. The way I always should have. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that patience is often mistaken for weakness. People see someone quiet and assume they're passive. They see someone documenting instead of arguing and assume they've given up. That's a dangerous assumption. Because some people don't fight with volume. They fight with records. With timelines. With evidence. With persistence. And when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't need anyone to raise their voice. It speaks for itself. That's what happened in my case. Not a dramatic courtroom confession. Not a surprise admission. Just documents, bank statements, signatures, transfers, facts lined up in the correct order. In the end, those facts recovered over $400,000 in hidden assets. They corrected a fraudulent settlement. And they reminded me of something I should have known all along. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's observation. And observation, when paired with patience, can be the strongest thing a person has.